Hare Krishna. Okay, thank you. Om Ajnana-timirandhasya Jnananjana-salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalan Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Tam Sachivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Anvitamscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine पञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Reading from Śrīla Prabhupāda-līlāmṛta, Volume 1, Chapter 25. Our Master has not finished his work. There was no warning that Śrīla Prabhupāda's health would break down, or if there were, no one heeded it. As he moved from his devotees in San Francisco to his devotees in New York, no one passed any word that Swamiji should slow down. After 5.5 hour jet flight, Prabhupada spoke of a blockading in his ears, but he seemed all right. He didn't rest, but went straight through the festive airport reception into 3 hours of strong lecturing and chanting in the storefront at 26 Second Avenue. To his New York disciples, he appeared dazzling and lovable, and by his presence, his glances, and his words, he increased their Krishna consciousness. To them, his advanced age, now nearly 72 years, was but another of his transcendental features. He was their strength, and they never thought to consider his strength. In the temple, speaking from a new dais behind a velvet-covered lectern, Prabhupada said, "In my absence, things have improved. New paintings hung on the freshly painted white walls. Otherwise, it was the same tiny storefront where he had begun his International Society for Krishna Consciousness. He had written them that he wanted to enter the new building on his return, but they had failed, and they had foolishly lost $6,000. But without dwelling on this, Prabhupada made a more important observation. His disciples, despite the physical absence of their spiritual master, had made progress by following his instructions. As he sat looking happily at the freshly painted walls and the bright faces of his disciples, Prabhupada explained how one obtained expertise in Krishna consciousness by submissively following the spiritual master. He gave the example that although an engineer's apprentice may not be expert, if he turns a screw under the direct supervision of expert engineer, he is acting as an expert. Many of the devotees were relieved to hear this. They knew that giving up material desires was difficult and that they weren't going to become completely pure devotees overnight. Brahmananda had even written a poem stating that if, after many lifetimes, he could chant one round of the Hare Krishna mantra with attention, he would consider this the greatest success. But Prabhupada was explaining that even if they weren't expert in love of Krishna, if they worked under an expert, they were also acting as experts. The next morning, with fanfare of Prabhupada's arrival past, it became apparent just how dependent the devotees were on their spiritual leader. The attendance was down to the dozen or so regulars, and Prabhupada silently entered the storefront and began to lead the chanting. But when the moment came for the devotees to sing in the response and Prabhupada heard their first chorus, he looked out to them, startled and compassionate. Now he could hear. They were weak, more like croaking than singing. They had deteriorated in his absence. The kirtans had changed while he had been away, and now he was hearing what devotees were like, helpless souls croaking without joy or verve. Srila Prabhupada lectured from Chaitanya Charitamrita. When flying from San Francisco, I noticed that the plane was flying above an ocean of clouds. When I came from India by boat, I saw an ocean of water, and on the plane, I saw an ocean of clouds extending as far as you can see. Above the clouds is the sun, but when we come down through the clouds and land, everything in New York is dim and clouded. But the sun is still shining. Those clouds cannot cover the whole world. They cannot even cover the whole United States, which is no more than a speck in the universe. From an airplane, we can see skyscrapers as very tiny. Similarly, from God's position, all this material nonsense is insignificant. As a living entity, I am very insignificant and my tendency is to come down. But the sun doesn't have the come down tendency. It is always above the clouds of Maya. A new boy raised his hand. Why is it that one person, one soul, comes to Krishna and another doesn't? Prabhupada replied with another question. Why is one soul in Babari and another has come to Krishna temple? He paused, but no one could reply because one wants to be here and the other doesn't, he explained. It is a question of free will. If we use it properly, we can go to Krishna. Otherwise, we will stay down in the material world. Everyone had something to ask Swamiji. Throughout the day, devotees would be in and out of his room asking practical and philosophical questions, and they took up their old ways of reciprocating with him. Once again, Prabhupada was telling Achyutananda what to cook for lunch and explaining to him that an expert servant learns to anticipate what the master wants even before he asks for it. Satsvarupa came in to show Prabhupada the latest typed manuscripts for teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Although there was no difference in Satsvarup's assignment, now that he was face to face with Prabhupada, he realized he has had to type and edit more seriously. He asked whether he could resign from his job at the welfare office. Prabhupada said no. Yadurani continued painting in the outer room of Prabhupada's apartment. Casting shyness aside, she asked him many questions about how to paint Krishna. How is Lord Vishnu situated in the heart? She asked, is he sitting or standing or what? Prabhupada replied, oh, for that you have to meditate for thousands of years. Yadurani stared at him in dismay. Then Prabhupada said, he is standing, and she went off happily to paint. When Yadurani complained of weak health, Prabhupada asked Achyutananda to see that she got milk twice a day. Looking through the window that opened into the outer room where typing, painting, and sometimes even construction went on, Prabhupada watched Yadurani one day as she worked on a painting of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan party. Just as she started to paint the words of Maha Mantra across the bottom of the painting, Prabhupada called through the window, "Don't put the Maha Mantra there." "But you told me to put it there," she said. "I have changed my mind. Hare Krishna should not be below Chaitanya Mahaprabhu." One by one, Prabhupada saw all his old New York followers, Gargamuni, the temple treasurer, who reported good sales of Hare Krishna record and incense, Raya Rama, editor of Back to Godhead, who talked about his indigestion, and Rupanuga, who had a good job but was having difficulty convincing his wife about Krishna consciousness. Even Mr. Chete, the landlord, dropped by with complaints about the boy's behavior. Prabhupada also met Michael Blumet, a newcomer. Michael had been seeing a psychiatrist as a result of devastating drug experiences. When he had begun coming to the temple, his mother and father had thought the Swami another evil force. On meeting Swamiji, however, Mrs. Blumet accepted his authenticity, although her husband remained doubtful. Mr. Blumet, Srila Prabhupada said, "Your wife is more intelligent." Mr. Blumet said he wanted his son to help the world in a more practical way by becoming a doctor. Prabhupada argued that there were already so many doctors, but still people were suffering. A Krishna conscious person, however, could relieve a person's suffering completely, so the work of Krishna consciousness was more valuable. Mr. Blumen was unconvinced, but he agreed to let Michelle stay with the devotees and drop going to the psychiatrist. He came to respect the Swami. even though disagreeing with him. When Brahmananda, Prabhupada discussed the urgent problem of obtaining a permanent visa. Prabhupada had repeatedly extended his visa ever since he had entered the country in 1965. Now immigration officials denied him any further extensions. He didn't want to leave the US, but the only way he would be able to stay would be to get permanent residency. He had applied, but so far with no success. Your government doesn't want me to stay, he had said. So I may have to go back to India. Swamiji's going back to India was a frightening prospect. His disciples had barely been able to accept that he would leave them for preaching elsewhere in the US if he were to go back to India. They feared they might fall back into the material world. He was sustaining their spiritual life. How could they go on without him? And Prabhupada felt the same way. Brahmananda managed to find a lawyer to delay the proceedings of the immigration office. The threat of deportation passed. Prabhupada spoke of going to Montreal and getting permanent residency there. But his main intention was to stay in America and cultivate what he had begun. Brahmananda reported to Prabhupada about printing the Bhagavad Gita. The manuscript was ready, and they were considering the cost where to print it, even though they didn't have enough money to publish the book themselves. They hadn't seriously attempted the arduous process of finding a publisher, but Prabhupada pushed Brahmananda to do so. The only hope is that I have my books. Brahmananda also talked with Prabhupada about the $6,000 he had lost to Mr. Price. Prabhupada insisted that they prosecute the culprits. He sent Brahmananda to speak with various lawyers and also to tell Mr. Price and Mr. Taylor that His Excellency was back and would take them to court. At that, they relented. Mr. Taylor refunded most of the 5,000 deposit, and Mr. Price returned 750 of the 1,000 he had wheedled out of Brahmananda. The legal services had costed more than $1,000, so that was lost. But Prabhupada said that when dealing with a tiger, you can expect to get scratched. In a letter to Kirtanananda in Montreal, Prabhupada described the successful termination of Price affair. You will be glad to know that I had been able, by grace of Krishna, to recover $4,227 out of $5,000 gone in the belly of common fraud Price. There were signs that Prabhupada should be cautious about his health. He had gone through difficulty while appearing on the Ellen Burke TV show. Ellen Burke was known for sitting back, smoking a cigar, and saying outrageous, even insulting things to his guests. And if a guest became offended, Mr. Brooke would provoke him all the more. It was a popular show. Before they went on the air, Mr. Burke had asked Prabhupada's permission to smoke a cigar, and Prabhupada had gracefully consented. Mr. Burke had introduced his guest as a real Swami. When he had asked Prabhupada why he was against sex, Prabhupada had said he wasn't. Sex should be restricted to marriage for raising Krishna conscious children. But Mr. Burke had persisted, wanting to know what was wrong with sex outside of marriage. The real problem of human life, Srila Prabhupada had replied, was self realization. When one's mind is preoccupied with capturing new sex partners, keeping the mental peace necessary for self realization becomes impossible. Mr. Burke had agreed. In fact, his manners had been the best ever, and at the end he had called Prabhupada a very charming gentleman. It was on his way home to the temple that Srila Prabhupada had said that the TV lights had caused him so much pain in his head that at one point he had thought he would not be able to continue. Then one day, Rupanaga, sitting close to Prabhupada's dais during the lecture, noticed Prabhupada's hand shaking as he spoke. Kirtananda had been there when, months ago, the morning after they had made the record, Prabhupada had slept late and complained of his heart skipping and of not being able to move. If I ever get badly sick, Srila Prabhupada had told Kirtananda, don't call a doctor. Don't take me to a hospital. Just give me my beads and chant Hare Krishna. Swamiji's disciples were reluctant to restrain him. Kirtananda had tried. At the Avalon, when Swamiji had been dancing and jumping and streaming with perspiration, Kirtananda had insisted that the kirtan stop, but the others had called him paranoid. Besides, Swamiji didn't like to be restrained, and who were they to restrain him? He was Krishna's empowered representative, able to surmount any difficulty. He was a proper devotee. He was a pure devotee. He could do anything. Hadn't he often described how a pure devotee is transcendental to material pangs? Swamiji had written a letter consoling a disciple's ailing grandmother. All our ailments are due to the external body. Although we have to suffer some time from the bodily inconveniences, especially in the old age, still, if we are God conscious, we shall not feel the pangs. The best thing is therefore to chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. The devotees figured that although Swamiji might give good instructions to someone's old grandmother, nothing like what had befallen her was ever going to affect him. Of course, he referred to himself as an old man, but that was mostly in lectures to show the inevitability of old age. To the devotees, Prabhupada's health appeared strong. His eyes shone brightly with spiritual emotions. His complexion was smooth and golden, and his smile was a display of health and well-being. One time, one of the boys said that Swamiji's smile was so virile that it made him think of a bull and iron nails. Swamiji was taking cold showers, going on early morning walks around the lower east side, playing mridanga, eating well. Even if his disciples wanted to slow him down, what could they do? Some of his disciples had actually tried to prevent him from attending the controversial Cosmic Lovin at the East Village Theatre, but not because of his health. They had wanted to protect his US residency case. Srila Prabhupada had been invited to attend the Love-In, a fundraising show for Louis Abolafia, the Love and Peace presidential candidate. Allen Ginsberg, Timothy Leary, and others were attending, along with a full lineup of rock bands. But when Prabhupada's lawyer heard that he was going, he said it might jeopardize the visa case. Some of the boys took up the lawyer's opinion and opposed Prabhupada's plan. Prabhupada agreed that it might be best if he didn't go, but on the day of cosmic Lovin, he changed his mind and decided to go anyway. I came to this country to preach Krishna consciousness, he declared. Now it was a time to speak against these LSD leaders who claimed to be spiritualists. He had been saying that although he wanted to go, he wouldn't go if his disciples forbade him. But in the end, he simply said he was going, and that was that. During the last week of May, Srila Prabhupada began to feel exhausted. He spoke of heart palpitations. Hoping that the symptoms would clear up in a day or two, Kirtananda requested Prabhupada to rest and see no visitors. But Prabhupada's condition became worse. Kirtanananda. Swamiji began to complain that his left arm wasn't functioning properly, and then he began to develop a twitching in his left side, and his left arm would twitch uncontrollably. It seemed to pain him in some mysterious way, internally or psychologically. Achyutananda. It was Sunday, 2 days before Memorial Day, and we had arranged a large program in the afternoon in a hall uptown. I went up to get Swamiji, since all the devotees were ready. Swamiji was lying down, and his face was pale. He said, "Feel my heart," and I felt a quivering vibration in his chest. I went down but didn't want to alert everyone and panic them. I went to Kirtanananda and quietly said, "The Swami is having some kind of mild heart palpitations." And immediately we both flew back. Swamiji said, "Just massage here." So I rubbed him on the chest and he showed me how. He said, "The others go and Achyutananda can stay here. If anything happens, he can call you." So the others went and did the program and I waited. Once or twice he called me in and had me quickly rub over his chest. Then he looked up and his color had come back. I was staring with my mouth open, wondering what to do. He looked at me and said, "Why are you sitting idle? Chant Hare Krishna." During the evening, palpitations again occurred, so I slept in the room next to his, and late at night he called me in and again had me massage. Kirtanananda. It was on Tuesday afternoon, Memorial Day, and I was sitting with Swamiji in his room. While Kirtan was going on downstairs, the twitching began again. Swamiji's face began to tighten up. His eyes started rolling. Then, all of a sudden, he threw himself back and I caught him. He was gasping, Hare Krishna, and then everything stopped. I thought it was the last until his breathing started again and with it the chanting, but he didn't regain control over his body. Brahmananda. I was there along with Kirtananda. It was on Memorial Day weekend. We couldn't understand what was wrong with Swamiji. He couldn't sit up. He was mourning and nobody knew what was happening. We nursed him, myself and Kirtananda, trying all different things. I had to go out and buy a bedpan for him. Prabhupada's left side was paralyzed. He asked that a picture of his spiritual master be put on the wall in front of him. Thinking that Prabhupada was preparing to leave his body and wanted to meditate at the last moment on his spiritual master, Achyutananda taped it to the door facing Prabhupada. Devotees entered the front room of the apartment and Prabhupada told them to chant Hare Krishna. Then he told them to pray to Krishna in his form of Nrsimhadev, Satswarupa. Swamiji said we should pray to Lord Nrsimha and the prayer should be, My master has not finished his work. At different times, he would allow us to take turns and massage different parts of his body. Then he had us go downstairs and hold Kirtana through the night. Yadurani. He taught us the prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev. He said the words one by one, and I wrote them down. I called up the temples in San Francisco and Montreal and told them the prayer. Swamiji said, You should pray to Krishna that my spiritual master has not yet completed his work, so please let him finish. Damodar. I went into the temple. No one was downstairs, so I just sat down to chant some rounds. Then a devotee came down looking very disturbed. So I asked what was going on. When he told me, I rushed upstairs. Everyone was sitting around in second room where they could see into Swamiji's room through the window in the wall. They were all chanting on their beads. Yadarani was handing out little slips of paper with writing on them. Swamiji, she explained, wanted us to chant these prayers. Brahmananda. We brought the painting of Lord Narasimha into Swamiji's room and we were all chanting. When Swamiji had to use the bedpan in front of Lord Narasimha's painting, he begged forgiveness of Lord Narasimha. He could understand that Lord Narasimha was sitting right in front of him. I saw it was a painting, but Swamiji saw it as Lord Narasimha himself sitting there. It was getting worse, total weakness and everything. I couldn't get a doctor because it was Memorial Day and everything was closed. I even called my family doctor, but he wasn't in. Everyone had gone on vacation because on Memorial Day everyone leaves the city. I couldn't get anyone. I was calling hospitals, doctors, trying this and that, but I couldn't get anyone. Finally, I got a doctor by calling an emergency number for New York City Medical Department. The doctor came. He was an old geezer with a real loud voice. When he saw Swamiji, he said, I think the old man is praying too much. I think he should get some exercise. He should go out for a walk in the morning. Achyutananda, the doctor didn't know very much. He said that Swamiji had a cold. I said, What do you mean? His heart is palpitating. Hmm, I don't know what to do. Does he take any whiskey? I said, he doesn't even drink coffee or tea. Very good, very good. Well, I think he has just got a cold. Dwarakadish Das. He came and took a look at the place, and you could tell right away he didn't like what he saw. He thought we were just a bunch of hippies. He couldn't wait to get out of the place, but he said, Oh, he's got influenza. That was a ridiculous diagnosis, and then he said, Give me my money. We paid him, the doctor left, and Swamiji got worse. The devotees called a second doctor, who came and diagnosed Srila Prabhupada as having a mild heart attack. He said that Prabhupada should at once go to the hospital. Max Lerner, a lawyer friend of devotees, I got a call one day that Swami had a mild heart attack and I could be of some help. At the time, they were going to take him to Bellevue Hospital, but I suggested that at least I could try to get him into a private hospital. After several hours of talking and negotiating with people at the hospital, we were able to get Swami Ji into Beth Israel hospital. Brahmananda. The day after Memorial Day, we had to arrange for an ambulance. But Israel had no ambulance, so I called a private ambulance company. It was all arranged with the hospital that Swamiji would arrive at 9 o'clock that morning. But the ambulance didn't come until about noon. During this time, Swamiji kept mourning. Then, finally, the ambulance came and they were horrible guys. They treated Swamiji like a bundle of cloth. I thought it would have been better if we had taken Swamiji in a cab. Except for Kirtananda, who stayed in Prabhupada's hospital room as a nurse, no one else were allowed to stay. They all went back to the temple to chant through the night as Prabhupada had requested. Kirtananda phoned Hayagriva in San Francisco and told him what had happened, how Swamiji had suddenly fallen back and cried out Hare Krishna, and how there had been nothing for about 30 seconds, and then a big gasp, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Kirtananda told Hayagriva that the devotees in San Francisco should chant all night and pray to Lord Narasimha. Tava Karakamalавare Nakham Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranya Kashipu Tanabringam Keshava Drita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare. Lord Narasimhadev, the half man, half lion incarnation of Lord Krishna, had appeared in another age to save his pure devotee Prahlad and killed the demon Hiranyakashipu. Prahlad had asked his disciples to pray to Lord Narasimha by chanting the special mantra and thinking, our master has not finished his work. Please protect him. The boys were back to the temple and chanted together, but after a few hours they fell asleep. They wanted to rest so that they could go to the hospital next day. Haridas. When we heard about it in San Francisco, there was grief and people were crying. There was a tremendous love and thinking about Swamiji and just concentration, a mass concentration of pulling him through, giving him strength and summoning the help of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya and everybody we could possibly call upon to lend their energies. People came into the temple doing rosaries and whatever faiths or beliefs or trips they were on, they were directing that toward a healing. They were all chanting with us. Hayagriva. It's a night I'll never forget. We turn on the altar lights behind the Jagannath light candles and chant in flickering shadows. It is solemn chanting and even more solemn dancing. News quickly spread down Head Street and soon the temple is crowded with others come to chant with us through the night. Mukunda and Janaki phone New York, but there is no additional information. Kirtananda is spending the night in the hospital beside Swamiji's bed. No one else is being allowed in. Hospital regulations? Yes, everyone in the New York is chanting. We chant past midnight. Most of the guests leave, but none of us yet feel sleepy. The chanting overtakes us in the waves. My mind wanders to Swamiji, to New York, to the future, to the past. I have to yank it back into the room to confront the present, to realize why we are here chanting, to petition Sri Krishna to spare our spiritual master a little longer to allow him to spread Lord Chaitanya's glorious Sankirtan movement around the world. The chanting is always here, insistent. By 2 a.m., I began to tire. I changed instruments just to keep awake, sometimes playing mridanga, sometimes cymbals or harmonium. Many dance to stay awake. The girls serve prasadam, sliced apples. It is dangerous to sit next to the wall, an invitation to doze off. We are so frail. Hare Krishna soothes. The chanting releases us from so much needless fretting. Through it, we can relieve tensions, grief, plead, and hope. It is between 3 and 4 a.m., the most ecstatic hour, the Brahma Muhurta hour before the dawn. If he is alive at this hour, surely he will live. We sing, we chant on beats, constant Hare Krishna. We chant through the usual 7 a.m. Kirtan hour and into the morning. We chant 14 hours without cessation. We cleanse the dust from the mind's mirror. We see Krishna and Swamiji everywhere. Surely now he is well. During the night, Srila Prabhupada's heart pained him. The next day he remained in critical condition. He could speak but softly and was too exhausted to converse. Skeptical of the doctors, he diagnosed himself a heart attack affecting part of his brain, thus paralyzing the left side of his body. Massage, he said, was the cure. On the morning of June 1st, other disciples joined Kirtanananda in Prabhupada's room and by taking shifts were able to give Prabhupada a constant massage. They took turns massaging his head, chest, and legs as he directed. This simple act drew each of them into an intimate relationship with him. When Prabhupada heard that not only in New York but in San Francisco also devotees had chanted and prayed all night, he expressed satisfaction, not by his usual hearty smile but by a very slight nodding and approving sound. Despite his weakness, he was fully conscious. The doctors are more often their aides took blood, gave injections and investigated. Their diagnosis wasn't conclusive. They had plans for experiments. Then suddenly a doctor came in and announced their next move, a tap. Prabhupada was too weak to discuss the pros and cons of a spinal tap. He had put himself in the care of his disciples and Krishna. The doctor didn't want to be impeded. He explained why a spinal tap was necessary, but he wasn't asking for consultation or permission. Everyone except for Kirtanananda, who insisted on staying, had to leave the room while the doctor performed the spinal tap. Neither Prabhupada, who was too weak, nor his boys, who were uncertain how to act on his behalf, opposed the doctor. The devotees filed out of Prabhupada's room while the doctor readed the largest, most frightening needle they had ever seen. When they were allowed back, one disciple asked cautiously, "Did it hurt, Swamiji?" Srila Prabhupada, his golden-skinned form wrapped in white hospital garments and lying between the white sheets, turned slightly and said, "We are tolerant." Rupanagam. When Swamiji was first admitted to the hospital, it was very hard for me. I didn't know how I should act. I didn't have much experience with this kind of emergency. I was very uncertain as to what service to do for the Swamiji. It was a frightening experience. Swamiji's life was at stake, yet his disciples didn't know what to do to save him. He lay on the bed as if at their mercy. But the hospital staff considered him their property, an old man with heart trouble, a subject of investigation, and for the Swamiji's disciple this was 100 times worse than dealing with Mr. Price and company. Now it was not just a matter of risking money but of risking Swamiji. Should they allow the EEG? What was an EEG? Was an operation necessary? An operation? But Swamiji had said that he should never even be brought to a hospital. "Give me massage," was all he had said and chant Hare Krishna. When Srila Prabhupada mentioned his preference for the Ayurvedic medical treatment available in India, some of the devotees suggested they bring a doctor from India. After considering the expense, Prabhupada decided to send a letter first. Unable to sit up or write, he slowly dictated a letter to Sri Krishna Pandit, who had given him quarters for several years in his temple in Delhi. Satsvarupa read it back to Prabhupada and then typed it right there in Prabhupada's hospital room. I was writing this letter from the hospital. All of a sudden, I have developed some headache as well as throbbing of chest. When I rub my chest, I feel some sensation in my left hand, and when I rub my left hand, I feel sensation in my chest. My left hand no more works independently. I therefore ask you if there is any good Vedic physician in Mathura who can send me some medicines. That is, you purchase and send them by airmail to our temple, ISKCON 26 Second Avenue, New York. The symptom is predominantly when I get severe pain within my head, and the trembling of left hand is coming every 10 or 15 minutes. I am afraid if this is not a disease like Lakhya, the boys are taking utmost care of me. There is no scarcity of care. But still, after all, this body is subject to death. I came here with great mission to execute my spiritual master's order, but my heart is stabbing me. Of course, I am not afraid of Maya. I know Maya cannot touch me, but still, if I die in this condition, my mission will remain unfulfilled. Please, therefore, pray to Prabhu, Lord Chaitanya, and Vrindavan Bihar to rescue me this time. My mission is still not finished. I wish to live for a few more days. They are prepared to call an experienced Ayurvedic physician who treats such diseases, but I have not allowed the boys. But if necessary, if you can give me an expert physician who can travel here, we can send necessary money for his coming here and or arrange for a air ticket. You can consult the man in charge of Dakka Shakti. Or at last, I may inform you that I am inclined toward Ayurvedic treatment. You can consult the Ayurvedic physician in Vrindavan who is a Gaudiya Vaishnava. He knows me very well. He sells my books also. Two things are to be done if it is possible. To send me proper medicines and directions, that will be nice. But if I require to return, that also I can do. Please try to reply as soon as possible in English because my students cannot read Hindi. So long as I am in the bed, it's not possible to read letters. You can treat this letter very urgently. Consult necessary physicians and let me know what I am to do. In Mathura, there was undoubtedly many Ayurvedic physicians and many quacks also. Try to avoid quacks. I would have returned to India immediately, but the doctors say it is risky. If need be, I shall return as soon as I get strength to take the strain of the journey. I repeat my symptoms so that you can take necessary care. All of a sudden, I developed some throbbing between the heart and stomach about 4 days ago. I was so exhausted it was like fainting. Then I consulted a doctor who came and gave me medicine, but it was of no good effect. Therefore, my students at once transferred me to the hospital where they are spending more or less 400 rupees daily. There is no question of neglect. All scientific treatment is going on. But I think Ayurvedic medicine will be proper. Therefore, I request you to take immediate steps and reply me. I hope this letter will convince you the actual position. While reading this letter, you may consult some friend who knows English very well so that he'll read it correctly and reply correctly. There is no scope for corresponding in Bengali or in Hindi. By Krishna's grace, on the afternoon of Srila Prabhupada's second day in the hospital, he showed slight improvement. His heart was still causing him pain. His facial expression remained grave, with never a smile, but he was a bit stronger. The interns, nurses, and doctors came and went on schedule treating him impersonally. One doctor did seem a little interested in what Prabhupada was all about, and at Prabhupada's request, Kirtanananda played a tape lecture for the doctor. He listened politely, but then said, "It doesn't ring a bell." The doctor said that he wanted to run a few more tests and that Swamiji might be able to leave after a few weeks if all went well. Srila Prabhupada tried speaking to the doctor, wanting to explain about Krishna. Yadurani had brought two of her paintings to the hospital room, one of the Radha and Krishna, and the other of fierce half lion, half man incarnation Lord Narsimha tearing apart the demon Hiranyakashipu. Speaking in a very low voice, Prabhupada said that these two pictures show how God is many-sided. Here he is in his loving exchange, and here also we see that anger comes from Krishna or God. The doctor politely said that he had his own philosophy and that Swamiji shouldn't be preaching while in such weak health. Uh, he should rest. Advising the disciples not to allow their guru to speak, the doctor excused himself and continued his rounds. Srila Prabhupada, with this slight improvement, expressed more disapproval of being in the hands of the hospital personnel. They weren't able to do anything, he said. Krishna was in control. If Krishna wants to kill you, then no one can save you. But if Krishna wants to save you, then no one can kill you. Damodar. I was there when a doctor came in to check his reflexes. There was the usual tapping with a little rubber hammer on his knees, that kind of thing. Swamiji was visibly annoyed with this man's coming in and tapping him all over. He was capable of diagnosing and giving the prescription for the cure, and it annoyed him that these men, who obviously didn't know what they were doing, were coming in and interfering with the process of recuperation. Achutananda, the nurse would always let the door slam, and every time it slammed, Swamiji would wince. He said, "Tell her not to slam the door." She would say, "Okay," and then she would let it slam again. Srila Prabhupada began sitting up in the bed and taking prasadam from the temple, supplemented by some of the vegetarian items in the hospital menu. He would say a prayer and offer the hospital food to the picture of his spiritual master. The devotees would sit at his feet, watching him as he then mixed with his right hand the carrots, peas, and mashed potatoes, and he would always distribute some of his food into the hands of the disciples. Yadurani, we brought him many different kinds of fruits. We told him we had brought apples, but he was so tired he only said, "Oh," and seemed disinterested. We told him we have brought oranges, but again, "Oh," he gave so many tired ohs, he seemed disinterested. Finally, I said, "We brought you watermelons, and he was silent for long into when he was asleep." Gradually, the paralysis on his left side went away. Once, while Srila Prabhupada was sitting up in bed, one boy massaging his leg and another softly, almost consolingly, stroking the back of his neck, Prabhupada remarked that if he were not sick, he would have considered the massaging and rubbing too familiar. Damodar. I was massaging Swamiji's temples with one hand, my thumb on one temple and other fingers on the other temple. As I was massaging, Swamiji kept saying, "Harder, harder." I would squeeze harder. I thought, "Gee, I don't know if I should squeeze so hard because he's sick," but he kept insisting, "Harder, harder." Purushottama. I was massaging Swamiji's head and I started singing the chant Sri Krishna Chaitanya. When I started singing, a very beautiful smile came on his face. Although I did it only briefly, he took pleasure in hearing. He seemed to take it that I was ministering to him just by singing Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Shri, as Srila Prabhupada gained strength, his disciples were ready with questions. Purushottam asked, Swamiji, in the scriptures, when it describes the lotus feet of Krishna, what does that mean, lotus feet? Prabhupada then sang a verse. Sam, Samasrita ye pada pallava pulanam mahat padam punya yasho murare bhavambudir vatsa padam param padam 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 yat vipadam ya natesham. Then he asked the three devotees present to repeat each line after him again and again until they had learned both the tune and the words. In this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada explained sitting up in his bed. The time of death is compared to crossing a vast ocean. It is very fearful. One doesn't know where he will go in the next life, and at every step there is a danger in the material world. But for one who has taken shelter at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, that vast dangerous ocean of birth and death becomes shrunk up to no more than the impression made in the mud by a calf's hoof print. There is danger, but the devotee doesn't care for it. Just like if a gentleman is riding in a carriage and he passes a small puddle, he considers it insignificant. So, do you understand now what lotus feet means? It was clear. Then Purushottam asked another question. Why do people say that God has no name? Srila Prabhupada replied by asking why, since God is everything, he should not have a name. In fact, he said, all names are describing Krishna. Prabhupada asked Purushottam what his name had been before initiation. Paul, he said. What does Paul mean? Prabhupada asked. It means little. Yes, Prabhupada said. That is Krishna. He is the smallest of the small. Satsvarupa then volunteered his name, Stephan, which means crown. Yes, Prabhupada replied, Krishna is the king. But discussions were rare. Usually the hours were quiet. Prabhupada rested and devotees on the watch sat in chairs on the opposite side of his bed reading or chanting softly on their beats. Late one afternoon, as the Manhattan sky turned to twilight, Prabhupada sat up after having been silent for an hour and said, I don't know Krishna, but I know my Guru Maharaj. One day, Brahmananda began giving Prabhupada a minute breakdown of financial condition of the New York temple. In the midst of detailed report, Brahmananda suddenly stopped, looked up at Prabhupada and said, do you want me to tell all the details? I thought you would want me to let you know. I mean, you should know. Prabhupada replied that if Brahmananda could take care of everything without his knowing the details, that would be all right. Suddenly one morning, Swami Satchidananda, Satchidananda, the famous Hatha Yoga Guru, entered Prabhupada's room, grinning through his big grey beard. He was dressed in a saffron silk kurta and yogi pants and accompanied by one of his young American male disciples. Srila Prabhupada sat up in bed, smiling at the pleasant surprise. They had not met before. Srila Prabhupada offered Swami Satchidananda a seat at his bedside and asked Yadurani to stand and give her seat to Swami Satchidananda's disciple. Prabhupada and Swami Satchidananda spoke in Hindi and no one else in the room could follow their conversation. At one point, however, Srila Prabhupada held up his hand and looked at it with indifference and then with disgust. Although his words were Hindi, the gesture and sardonic expression conveyed his meaning. The body was material and therefore could not be expected to be well. Prabhupada asked Achyutananda to read aloud from a particular purport of Srimad Bhagavatam. If there is enough milk, enough grains, enough fruits, enough cotton, enough silk, and enough jewels, then why the people need for economic development in the shape of machines and tools? Can the machines and tools supply vigor and vitality to the man and animals? Can the machinery produce grains, fruits, milk, or jewelry or silk? Is not jewelry and silk varieties of foodstuff prepared with ghee and grains or milk and fruits sufficient for man's pure, luxurious, and healthy life? Then why there is artificial, luxurious life of cinema, cars, radio, flesh, and hotels? Has this civilization produced any good result more than the dog's mentality of quarreling with one another individually and nationally? Has this civilization enhanced the cause of equality and fraternity by sending thousands of men in the hellish factory and the war fields at the whims of the particular man? When Prabhupada offered to play the record he and his disciples had made, Swami Satchidananda politely agreed. But when Prabhupada offered to play the other side of the record, Swami Satchidananda said he had to leave. He offered Prabhupada some fruits, and Prabhupada, after accepting them, told his disciples, distribute these and give him some of our fruits in exchange. As Swami Satchidananda rose to leave, Srila Prabhupada suddenly got up of the bed and stood shakily. No, 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 Swami Satchidananda protested, don't disturb yourself. And then he was gone, escorted by Achyutananda. Srila Prabhupada lay back in the bed. Is he a Swami? Yadrani asked. Why not? Prabhupada replied, but after a few moments he added, Swami means one who knows Krishna. There was no more talk about it. But Prabhupada was pleased by unexpected visit. The constant coming and going of Srila Prabhupada's young followers wearing tilak on their foreheads and carrying watermelons, special food, flowers, and paintings of Krishna created a special interest among the hospital staff. Sometimes workers would ask questions and sometimes the devotees would talk with them about the Hare Krishna movement. Once a nurse came by Prabhupada's room and asked, in the caste system in India, what is the name of the highest caste? What are they called? Krishna consciousness. Krishna conscious, Prabhupada firmly replied. He asked the disciple to give the nurse prasadam. On June 5th, Prabhupada received an affectionate letter signed by all his disciples in San Francisco. After reading how they had stayed up all night chanting and praying for his recovery, he dictated a short letter. My dear boys and girls, I am so much obliged to you for your prayers to Krishna to save my life. Due to your sincere and adherent prayers, Krishna has saved my life. I was to die on Tuesday certainly, but because you prayed sincerely, I am saved. Now I am improving gradually and coming to original condition. Now I can hope to meet you again and chant with you Hare Krishna. I am so glad to receive the report of your progressive march and how there will be no difficulty in your understanding Krishna consciousness. My blessings are always with you, and with confidence you go on with your chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I wanted to ask.
Mhm.
So we say that when we hear that somebody, whatever he meditates at the end of his life, he gets that destination. Yeah.
Mhm.
So if somebody meditates upon his spiritual master at the time of deathbed, so in that case, does he follow his spiritual master wherever he is
Yeah.
serving Krishna?
Yeah. Good question. Whether he will go to his Krishna. I mean, in Bhagavad Gita, it is said that if one remembers Krishna in the end, then he will attain his nature. Yeah, Krishna's nature,
Yes.
which means to be there. And remembering spiritual master, yeah, will definitely is that to serve him, right? So to always be, yeah, because we are so much indebted to our spiritual master. So remembering him would always be kind of okay. Yeah, still having the connection with the spiritual master. Mm. And this is what, yeah, we see sometimes that Prabhupada has called his disciples to follow him in some other world or some other universe. That's why they are, yeah, his disciples are going, and similarly, the disciples are also praying all, yeah, as we see that Kadam Karan Maharaj is saying that if people come to Vrindavan, people go to Radha Kund, Sham Kund, and but yeah, he said that Prabhupada is so important. Mm. Yeah, so this is what also is the mood of disciples that, or we should develop such a mood that it's not like, okay, it's enough here, we are struggling enough, we want a relief, and we want to actually go and busy serve the Lord there. Yeah, but serving Lord can be done anywhere. Hmm? And how best we can do is by following instructions of spiritual master. So yeah, one can develop such a mood of praying that are connecting to the spiritual master because yeah, if spiritual master is in the spiritual world and he wants to push us there, he will push us there. Yeah, we want to give that in his hands, right? We are simply surrendered soul.
Yes, correct, Prabhuji. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, today
Hare
being
Krishna.
yeah, Radhikali Mataji. Were you able to say something or no? It was the Ankeli Mataji. Mhm. Okay, yeah. Today is a Prabhupada disappearance day. Yeah, it was not June 1st. Yeah, because of what we read was already very, very critical condition and at age of 72. But yeah, prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, we can see how powerful they are. And this also gives a way how we should, yeah, follow the instructions of Prabhupada. Yeah, that he asked his disciples to do. So when we are chanting, we are doing this Narasimha Japa. Yeah, I think we are doing right thing for the welfare of everyone, especially spiritual master and so many Vaishnavas. Okay, thank you so much. Vanchakalpatarabhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Śrīla Prabhupāda ki jai. His Holiness Sattvarupa Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.